Have you ever had your parents tell you to do something but you didn't want to do it because you didn't like it? Well, that's what happened between South Carolina and the federal government in the years 1832 to 33, during the presidency of a very controversial Andrew Jackson. After the War of 1812, Congress had the bright idea of passing two tariffs, the Tariff of 1816 and 1824, which made southern states get their imports from Great Britain. A couple years after those, the then President John Quincy Adams signed the tariffs of 1828, which affected imports from Europe. These tariffs were so incredibly bad that political opponents of Adams had named it the Tariff of Abominations. Jesus, it's horrible. A couple years later, South Carolina, a southern state that relied heavily on agriculture and slavery, was going through a heavy economic decline due to the low industrialization, low agricultural growth, and increased immigration during those years of 1832 and 33. Safe to say they were going broker than a seasoned gambler on a bad day. After Andrew Jackson was signed into the Oval Office, the people of South Carolina breathed easily, knowing that the very agreeable, truly kind President Jackson will make their financial issues go away and they will live in perfect harmony. If only. What Jackson did was, nothing. He literally did nothing. And so a radical group in South Carolina, known as the State Rights Party, had the greatest idea that would solve all their problems, and they brought it up to a state convention they called after winning 2/3 of the seats in the legislature. What their idea is simply saying no.
And so, on November of 1832, same day of the convention they declared the Ordinance of Nullification, a big document that in summary just says that any and all public officials, i.e. politicians and officers, must take an oath to uphold nullification, which just means that they will just ignore the government and not give them their money. And if they try to take it by force, they would succeed from the Union, and we all know that denying large organizations such as the government, their money will almost never go wrong. At around this time, John C. Calhoun, the then vice president, had stepped down and ran as South Carolina governor, so that he could further advocate for the state Calhoun had been involved in, the Ordinance of Nullification, before during the South Carolina Exposition and Protest of 1828, which was a document that declared the tariff unconstitutional. The paper was drafted by Calhoun. His name just never appeared on the paper. And as the now senator, he made an address to the Senate where, in summary, he stated that states have the right to challenge any act made by the government if deemed unconstitutional. After the passing of the Ordinance of Nullification, Andrew Jackson, being the very reasonable and understanding person he is, saw this as a clear threat to the Union of the United States and to the federal authority. And so he pushed the force bill into Congress so that the government can go get their money by force. He later had his proclamation to the people of South Carolina, where stated that disunion by armed force is treason because, God forbid, someone disagrees with you.
Around this time, an unknown New Yorker decided to take a stab at the whole ordeal and made a satirical song and called it Jackson and the Nullifiers, where they mocked the whole idea of nullification, saying that South Carolina is dumb to try to defy the laws of the Constitution they agreed to. They also laughed at the whole idea of secession, saying that if South Carolina succeeded, their economy would fail tremendously. Not only did the song poke fun at nullification, they also praised Andrew Jackson and the Union, saying that they would defend their country's law no matter what. He later rebutted Calhoun's stance on states' rights by saying, "No, you can't do that if you're part of this union. You must follow its laws." South Carolina, after being given the "My House, My Rules" talk by Andrew Jackson, very understandably had the response most teens have to the statement saying, "I do what I want," as well as saying that they have the right to leave the Union peacefully if they choose to. South Carolina was also attempting to get other southern states into its teenage rebellion, but was met with failure. And what made things worse is that in March of 1833, Congress passed the Force Bill, which gave Jackson the right to use military force if necessary. With South Carolina's being isolated, and with Jackson holding a metaphoric gun to their head in the form of military force, South Carolina tapped out and retreated. They did have a small win, however, when Senator of Kentucky, Henry Clay, was able to negotiate a better deal of tariffs for South Carolina. Later in March, South Carolina rescinded the Ordinance of Nullification, but as a final middle finger to Mr. Jackson by nullifying the force bill.
And while a resolution was reached, the tension between the federal government and South Carolina was still there, festering, as they realized how vulnerable they were as long as they were a part of the Union. South Carolina at the time did not realize that they had set a precedent for using threats of secession and nullification that was used very frequently up until the Civil War, adding to the tensions between states and the federal government. And of course, Andrew Jackson did not make things better by taking out the belt and threatening South Carolina with military force if they did not comply, effectively strong-arming them, showing the states that the federal government will go to extreme lengths to enforce its laws, making way for the use of military force in 1861. In the years to come, when abolition was being discussed in the 1860s, the southern states adopted the idea of states' rights and cited the Nullification Crisis to protect themselves and preserve slavery.